Good morning, I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche organization with your daily video update for July 30th, 2024. Well, I'm sure many of you noticed that I was not here to do an update yesterday, and I apologize for that, but I was involved in some very important meetings and have a significant report for you today of a contrast between the ongoing degeneration of the cultures in the West versus a move toward the decolonization of the world and the coming together of various forces in the global South and now increasingly in Europe for that transformation. And the contrast is between the absolutely horrendous display in Paris at the Paris Olympics of the flotilla of boats on the Seine, which included at the center a vulgar parody of Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper, in which a gaggle of drag queens were there to portray the disciples and Jesus himself. It included a naked figure lying on the table that was probably Dionysus, the Greek god of wine, and also Maria Antoinette with her head cut off, carrying her head. Now, this was so over the top that it was denounced by Christian church officials around the world. It was also denounced by the Iranians, who said it was unacceptable desecration of the image of the prophet Jesus. And so it was. It was clearly approved by Macron. It was the work of a French dramatist, and the organizing committee defended it, even as the rest of the world spoke out against it. This is the image that leads the rest of the world to look at the West and say, what's wrong with you? And in fact, this is what Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov describes as the post-Christian era. Now, in contrast to that, there was well, actually, let me just go a little further with that, because what you see is the toleration of this kind of degradation is why there's no outcry in the West, significant outcry from leaders against the ongoing proxy war of NATO against Russia in Ukraine, nor against the genocide of the Palestinian population being carried out by the Israelis with full support of most Western governments. Now, this was again highlighted by the Netanyahu speech before the U.S. Congress, where congressmen were jumping up and down cheering while Netanyahu was calling for war with Iran, a war to total victory over the Palestinians, no discussion of rescuing the hostages, no discussion of a peace plan for Gaza. Again, another horrendous spectacle of the decline of the West. Now, in contrast to that, there was a conference in Orvieto, Italy, of a new political grouping coming into existence, which was addressed by Helga Zepp-LaRouche of the Schiller Institute. The topic of the conference was, quote, "The ghost of sovereignism is once again haunting Europe," unquote. And other speakers included the party leader, Gianni Alemanno, who's the former mayor of Rome, Jeffrey Sachs from the United States, the Russian ambassador to Italy, and importantly, the presentation from Helga Zepp-LaRouche, which was an open rejection of the moral degeneration that we see at the end of an empire. I just want to read you a couple of quotes from her speech, because it was not only well received, but it actually defines the battleground we find ourselves in at present. After discussing the necessity for a new strategic and development order, she came to this final point. She said, "Lastly, I think we need a cultural renaissance. I agree that we have to go beyond the Greek, Roman, Christian foundation, but we need a classical renaissance of the best tradition of Europe. The Greek classics, the contribution of Dante, Petrarca, and of the Golden Renaissance in Italy, the German classical period from Bach to Beethoven, from Lessing to Schiller. These are so important ideas, and our young people have totally forgotten them. So we have to revive them and make it real. She continued, furthermore, we need a dialogue between the best tradition of Europe and the best tradition of China, India, Africa, Latin America, because only if we understand the other culture can we discover the beauty of the poetry, of the music, and we start to love these other countries. And that is the best medicine against the kind of chauvinism and wrongly understood nationalism. And she said, in conclusion, I have not heard Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Council, Olaf Scholz, Annalena Baerbock, or any of these people ever speak about any beautiful idea of Europe. That is why they are completely unfit to save Europe at this point. And her remarks were greeted with very long, sustained applause. So what she laid out is that we're in a situation where there's ongoing wars and threats of wars that are a product of post-Christian paganism, including sanctions that destroy nations and kill children. A war between that and a dialogue of cultures, which is committed to defending the beautiful creative potential of every human being. Now, in this context, there are political moves that are trying to bring Europe and the United States out from under this cloud of degeneration. Interestingly, as this meeting was going on in Italy, the Italian Prime Minister Meloni was in China, where she met with Xi Jinping. Now, the Chinese and the Italians in 2019 had a memo of understanding on the extension of the Belt and Road Initiative into Italy. And when Meloni came in as Prime Minister, she junked it. They rejected it, threw it out. Now, this was obviously on Xi Jinping's mind when he addressed her in their meeting. And here are some of the remarks that he made. He said, the Silk Road spirit, referring to the Belt and Road Initiative, of peace and cooperation, of openness and inclusiveness, is a shared treasure of China and Italy. And then he called for upholding and promoting the Silk Road spirit for trade and economic ties between the two countries. Now, this is important because the Chinese are now playing a much bigger role internationally in fighting for peace in Ukraine, in Gaza, where they had a reconciliation conference of the various factions of the Palestinians. And the Chinese are also committed to the idea of what they call win-win cooperation, as opposed to the imperial idea of we win, you lose, because we're the superpower. So it's the contrast between those two approaches in economics and trade, which also are evident in the contrast between the kind of cultural degeneracy championed by Macron at the Paris Olympics and the idea instead of a revival of a culture which celebrates human creativity wherever human beings are. That's the fight that we have. Now, just a couple of other notes on this. There was a retired French general, Schaeffer, who announced support for Orban's peace initiative. He praised it as a way of ending the fighting. And I bring this up because Orban is the one European leader who's on a mission to end this war in Ukraine, while the rest of the Europeans in NATO are talking about permanent war against Russia. Now, additionally, there was a speech by Orban in Rumania, which I'll see if I can get to link tomorrow, where he spoke about 500 years of colonialism coming to an end. In other words, he was very clear, as is Putin, that we've reached a point in world history where the exploitation of nations for the benefit of corporate cartels not only must end, but will end. And that opens the way for the kind of win-win cooperation that Xi Jinping is talking about, or that characterized the West in its better periods of economic development. So this is the contrast. This is the fight. And I'm appending in the description section, once again, the 10 principles that Helga Zepp-LaRouche drafted as a discussion paper for how to approach this end of the imperial era and the creation of an era of peace and prosperity. So thanks for joining me today, and I'll be back as usual tomorrow.